And hello, good evening and welcome officially. Tonight we are looking at Affinity Photo. This time it is Affinity Photo for Mac. But before we start that, who the devil am I? Well, I am Elaine Giles. I'm a long-time trainer, podcast host, and I love my software. I'm a bit of a digital geek. I do love my software, particularly my Affinity Photo and my Affinity Designer. I love Affinity software. So as I say, it's Affinity Photo tonight. All of these demos that I'm going to cover, and I'm going to look at 6 particular areas of Affinity. These are the demos that I recently did when I looked at Affinity Photo for iPad. I did 2 sessions on that, and these demos are from the second session that I did for Affinity Photo for iPad. So if you've watched the iPad version, we had lots of people asking us to do the same demos, but on the desktop version, and that's what I'm doing tonight. And those 6 areas that I covered were red eye, so how to fix red eye in a couple of different ways, cropping and straightening, blend modes, working with Photoshop files, panoramas, and I threw in filters, and the filter that I threw in was the erase white paper filter, so we'll be looking at that as well. If you haven't seen all of the previous sessions, don't worry, you can still view them. There is a jump-off page on my website, which is elainegiles.co.uk/affinity-photo. And from there, you will find links to all of the sessions that I've done dedicated to Affinity Photo. So, without further ado, we're going to head off into the demo. Hopefully there's a broad range of demos there and there will be something for everybody. So let's go in and have a look. Right, so I've got Affinity Photo open on my desktop. I've not done too much with the interface in terms of customizing it. So it's pretty much what I would expect yours to look like, give or take. And first thing I'm going to do is look at red eye and the red eye tools and what you can do with red eye. And I've got 4 little demos of this because it is very, very simple. So the first one is probably the easiest type of red eye to deal with, which is it's very obvious. It's very clear, it's got very high contrast with the background, so it's not going to be difficult at all. So all that you need to do is to go and get the red eye tool. The trickiest thing is to know where the tool is. So over across on the tools palette on the left hand side, if you click on the little disclosure triangle at the bottom, so just make sure that you can see that there at the bottom of some tools, not all of them. If we go up and have a look, some have a little triangle and some don't. The ones that do, it's a disclosure triangle, and what it means is there's extra tools underneath that top tool. So normally this tool there would be showing the healing brush tool. If this was a clean install, it would. But the last tool I used was the painting brush tool, so that's why that one is showing. And the tool that we're interested in is the red eye removal tool. So just enabling that tool and moving over to the image. I'm going to zoom in so we can see that. And literally all you need to do with this is draw around the bit of the eye that is red. And you get a little square box. When you let go, it fixes it. It's as simple as that. It just fixes it. No skill required whatsoever. So what I'm going to do is zoom out so we can see that. So you can see that the left eye of the child on our right hand side is fixed. Now zoom into the other eye and do exactly the same again. So giving it enough space around the red eye so it can find the contrast, and you are done. So zoom out and let's have a look at that. So I will go back so you can see it. That was the before. And that is the after. That is by far the easiest type of red eye to deal with. There's no reflections in it. There's nothing at all complicated about it. Nothing at all. So what I'll do is I'm going to save that file and close it down and go and get another one. The second one, a little bit trickier. A little bit trickier. This one's got a catch light in it, but not too tricky. So just zooming into it, you can see this one isn't as high resolution as the last one. It's got a little bit of pixelation on it. But again, getting that tool, and what I'm going to do is duplicate the background so we can do a comparison. Again, drawing around it so it's got enough of the area you want to keep to work out which is the red eye. And again, it works fantastically well. Doesn't need anything else doing to it at all. I'll just toggle off that extra layer that I created. So that's the before. And that's the after. The catch light stays, so if you've tried doing this in other ways, just by drawing over the top of it, maybe scribbling with a pencil or the brush tool, doesn't give you the best results. What you've done here is you've desaturated the red out of the eye, but left the catch lights and left the rest of it. So this is really the best way to do it. So there is an example. It's slightly more difficult than the other one. I shall put these all on the desktop. I'll regret that later. But right now I will. I won't. I'll put them in the data folder. That's better, isn't it? Stick them in the data folder. Right, let's go on for a third one that's a little bit more difficult still. This one is quite alarming. So let's open that. I was alarmed when I saw that. And these images were from Wikipedia, and Wikipedia was using them to demonstrate red eye itself. So I thought they were great images to try working with. And you're not playing ball now. I'm trying to duplicate the layer and you're not doing it. There we go. So I thought they were good images to try working with. Now this one is a little bit more difficult. Not because the red eye is spreading or there's any, you're at an angle, or even the catch light, because we've seen that that will work. I will show you why this is a little bit more difficult once we've got rid of the main red eye, which I'm going to do in exactly the same way as previously, just draw around it. As you can see, it does leave the catch light in the eye, so the reflection off what looks like a flash. But I'm just going to zoom in, and to do that I'm holding down the Option key and scrolling inwards, and you can see there that yes, it's fixed it, but you've got a very purple tone over the catch light. And you can see that if you zoom out, it's still a little bit purple. So what we could do with doing is toning down the purple a little bit. Now you can do that with a tool that's available with the Dodge brush tool, Burn brush tool, and Sponge brush tool. And the one that I would use is the Sponge brush tool. Now once you enable a tool, you get a strip just under the main toolbar at the top that gives you options dedicated to that specific tool. Now, a sponge tool can saturate part of an image or desaturate part of an image. So for instance, if I were to saturate here by going over the eye there, and I'm just clicking, dragging, you can see what's happening. It's becoming much more intense, the colours there, becoming much more saturated. So I'm just going to undo that a little bit. Don't want to go too far back, that will be fine. This time though, I don't want to saturate it, I don't want to make it look worse, I want to make it look better. So I go to the desaturate option, and moving over the top of the area, which is the catch light, and just click, it leaves the light, but it takes away the purple tone. So if you compare the left eye with the right eye, you've still got the light, but now it just looks much purer, much clearer. It doesn't have that purple fringing on it. So I'll do that on the other one. So just clicking and moving across it repeatedly. There we go. So that was the after. There's the before. Not great. Not great before. But not only with the after have you managed to lose the red eye, but you've also managed to lose that fringing on the highlight on the eye there. So again, very, very simple. I will save these files as I go. So just save that there. Now, they're the easy ones. No doubt when you come to use them, they'll be trickier. These will be real images that you're working with, and you'll look and you'll think it might do it, it might not do it. What I've got is an image that is a genuine image. I found this online, and it's one of those situations where you can't ask somebody to do it again. Can you just come back and shake hands again? So this is a genuine image. If I zoom in a bit, you can see the problem with the red eye. Not only is it glaringly obvious that there's red eye with it, but if we go nearer, and they will pixelate a bit, but you can see you've not just got red, you've also got very pale tones of red bordering on lemony pink at the edges. So that's the problem with this image, and again, it's one of these situations where you can't ask for the image to be taken again. So what can you do with that? How well would it work on an image like that? Well, I'm zooming in and I'm going to get the red eye tool. So I'm starting off in exactly the same way with the red eye tool and drawing around it. It does make a massive difference. So that's the good bit. It does make a massive difference. Doesn't exactly look natural at that point though. It is an image where you need to pull back, and then it does start to look a lot better. Personally, I would spend a lot more time on this image and try and bring back some of the colours that were supposed to be in the eye, rather than what you're left with, which is quite a flat greyish look. But if we turn off the layer that I fixed and turn back on the background layer, you can see it has done its job. It has made a massive difference there. All I think I would probably do with that is tone it down a little bit. Again, what you could have in there, if we zoom in and have a look, you're left with a pinkish tone, virtually skin tone in colour, but it is a little bit pinkish. So you could go back and get the desaturate tool, which is the sponge tool set to desaturate, and just take a little bit more of the colour out so it goes to virtually grey, and you get rid of the residue of the little red pixels there. And that is a much better image. Even though I'm zoomed out, you can still see you do have terrible red eye, and you've managed to fix it. So that one is much more likely to be the kind of images that you're working with, where you literally can't ask for it again, and it's not straight on, it's on a skew, it's got different catch lights on it, all sorts going on with it. So that's it for red eye. Fairly straightforward, red eye. The tool works very, very well. So we will move on and we will look at cropping and straightening. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a quick folder, which I'm going to put the files in as I work through and I finish with them, in case you've got any questions about them later and I need to go back to them. So the next thing I'm going to look at is cropping and straightening. And I actually have an image here, which is one of the standard images that people would use to show you cropping and straightening. Now, this happens to be a digital negative file. It's a DNG file. Be aware that when you're working with raw images, as you take your image in, it will open up a different persona. If you're not aware of what personas are, it should be by now, because this isn't the first session we've done, but there are 5 personas in Affinity Photo. So they are at the top here. You have, first of all, your photo persona, which is the one you will spend the majority of your time in. Moving along, you have the liquify persona, which allows you to use dedicated liquify tools to manipulate images. The third one is the develop persona, which is the one that we have moved into now with this raw image. And for completeness, the other two are the tone mapping persona and the export persona. So we are in this develop persona. A persona is like a toolkit that will enable you to work with just the tools that are relevant given the task that you are doing. So the interface will change. We have a lot less tools on the left-hand side, and we have dedicated panels on the right-hand side that are dedicated to processing raw images. So this raw image has had nothing done at all with it yet. Nothing at all. This isn't a session on processing raw images, but just for the sake of completeness, I would be doing things with this image. So I'll show you that how I would process a raw image is I would turn on the clipped highlights option and the clipped shadows option. And at the moment, we haven't got anything clipped in there at all. To show you what will happen when we have, the red is indicating blown out highlights. So we can't go that high up, which we wouldn't want to anyway. And if I take the brightness down, we should get to see some... No, you're not doing it there. Let's move the black point. That'll do it. As you see the blue bits there, they are bringing out where there is now lost detail in the shadows. So handy to turn those on when you're working with raw images. So I don't need it that dark. I will darken it up a little bit. And I'll just really start to work with this, bring in some contrast with it. It does work well with clarity, this image. Now, the thing is, as I bring the clarity up, you see what's happening with the blue dots I get? The blue areas, it's telling me I've lost detail. But I do want a little bit of clarity adding to it because those stones need it at the beginning. Then I would add to the saturation so it looks like the warm day that it was. And add a little bit to the vibrance there as well. And I could do a lot more with that, but this isn't showing you that. This is showing you that the horizon there is sloping downwards to the left. Not badly, but enough to be noticeable. And although I'm in the develop persona, I can actually straighten this image in there. I have a dedicated crop and straighten tool. It does say crop tool. You'd be forgiven for missing this. But if I activate that tool, one of the extra options just at the top is there is a button that says straighten. And if I go into the straighten option, the tool will change. Just to show you that you can also get to that straighten option by holding down the command key on a Mac. And as you do that, your cursor changes to be a spirit level and you can do it that way. But if you can't remember that, you can just use this straighten option. That will give you exactly the same tool. All you then need to do, so I'll zoom in so we can actually see it. All you then need to do, come on, straighten, let me see it. You're not going to do that. Oh, yes, you are. There we go. Is draw a line across the horizon that you want straightened. And if you saw there, it did move ever so fractionally. What I will do is I will redo that, zoomed out, and you will actually see it move. So back to there, draw a line across the new horizon, and it rotates it sufficiently so that horizon is straight. Having said that, it doesn't look straight to me. Now it looks like it's going the other way. Okay, let's try that again. Let's try and straighten that a little bit without it going too far the other way. There we go. Give or take. But you've introduced problems down here. You've got these pixels that are missing. What I'm going to do purely for speed is show you that you can use the crop tool to get rid of what is now negative space. There are other ways to deal with that, but purely for speed, I'm just going to crop it so we lose those areas that have got no pixels in at all. And double click to apply that. Now, bearing in mind here that we are still in the develop persona. If you are unsure whether you are in the develop persona, you have two indications in the top left. The first one is of the top 5 buttons, the personas, the middle one is pushed in, and you also have a blue button that says develop. So when you finish developing this image, and I think I'd probably go a lot further than that if I was doing it for real, you need to hit the develop button and it will take you in. And that is definitely leaning the other way, but you get the principle of it. So now you've moved back into the photo persona and you have your full range of tools available from the left-hand side, and you can start to work on this image. So what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to do a save as and save it back to my completed stuff here. There we go. And get another image, one that is much more obvious. So my second example for this is a scan. And this was a scan of a photograph of me, that really is me, not changed at all, not aged a bit either. It was done on a flatbed scanner, so it was done from a photograph which is more years old than I would care to admit publicly. And I wasn't really concerned about getting it flat on the glass because you never get it perfect anyway. You'd only be fiddling around with it, so you might as well fiddle a lot as fiddle a little. This is not a digital negative. This is not a camera raw file or a DNG file. This is just a plain JPEG. So I'm going to straighten it in a different way. So this time I'm going to use the crop tool. There we go, just activate that. I'm going to use the crop tool that's in the standard set of tools on the left hand side. And it's up towards the top, or you can use the C key for that. So clicking on the tool brings up the thirds grid. Now, if you don't want to work to a thirds grid, if you're cropping for some other reason, you can also use a golden spiral, or you can use diagonals. So depending on what image you're working with, it may be more appropriate to have one of those others set. Now, this image is going to need cropping. That little line that we've got just underneath the photograph is actually part of the scanner. So it's managed to capture that as well. What I need to do is to use the straighten tool again. So I'm going to click that straighten button and it takes away my thirds grid. And then what I can do is click and drag along the bottom edge of that photograph. And hopefully I will get something that looks straight today. That looks better. That looks much straighter. Again, I've lost detail in the corners. So I've got white pixels and then I've got transparent ones in a little triangle at each corner, because how it's straightened it is by rotating it. And when it does that, we have other issues. And I've just clicked and I shouldn't have done, but I'll sort that out. Okay. What that is it's put that grid very tiny there. What I need to do with this is move this grid or size this grid so it's around my photograph. That's what I need to do there. So I'll just stretch that down. Now, what I could do with this, I've got two options with this, with it being an older photograph. I said older, not old. Is I could leave a little bit of a white border on it if I wanted to and trim it down later. But I'm just going to go to make it finished right now, which is just put that slightly inside the image. Now, last time I double clicked on it, and I can double click again, and that would do the same. But I can also click on the apply button up in the left hand corner as well if I wanted to. So apply that and it crops that image. And as I've said when I've used this image before, this is a raw scan. There is literally nothing done with this. This image in particular would benefit from some adjustments. It would definitely benefit from things like level adjustments, because there are no pixels that are absolutely black, and there are like 2 pixels that are absolutely white. So if I brought that in like that, you would see that there is a difference there. So that's the before, that's the after. So this is merely the starting point of working with this image. It's certainly not the finish point of working with it. So again, I am going to save that image in my completed files, lest anybody asks me any questions. Now, whenever I've seen demonstrations of the straighten tool, everybody's straightening to a horizon, or they're straightening to an image like you've just seen of a scan. And I thought, well, what if you needed to straighten a different way? You might think, well, what other way could you need to straighten? And I thought, well, let's get ambitious. Let's straighten this one. I know it's supposed to look like that, but that's not the point. Can we straighten it? So what I'm going to do here is do exactly the same as previously. The difference being, when I get into the crop tool and I use the straighten option, instead of going across the screen left to right or right to left, I'm actually going to be trying to straighten this leaning tower by going upwards. So if I go there up that column, now that's not what I want. That's happening because I'm zooming in and out, and as I'm zooming in and out, it's taking away my straighten tool, which is not helpful of it. So let me just try and do it there like that. Can we do it like that? That's about right, I think. Well, yes, it's much straighter. It is much straighter. We've lost the edges, of course. We've lost those little triangles off the corner again. But I'm going to apply that anyway. And what I'm going to do is, you've got 2 options, as I've said previously. You could crop the image. You'd lose quite a bit on this one, though. I think you could try and fill it, is one option. And what I'm going to show you is filling it down the bottom here. So let's fill the green first. The rest of it may have to take care of itself, purely for speed, but let's do it. So I'm getting a new layer. The new layer, of course, would have to be behind the layer that I've just straightened, which is that one there. I do have the original at the back. That will have been straightened as well, but I've got that there anyway. I need that there to pull the pixels from. So let's see what we can do with this. Let's see what tool would work best. I actually think the clone tool brush would probably work best for this. So I'm going to zoom in a bit so we can see it. And it needs to go on this pixel, this layer here, really, so I can undo it. And how this tool works here is that, let me look, clone brush. Yeah, I need there to pick up some green pixels. So I go up to there. I don't want to go too far up because there's people walking about. And I'm going to need a bigger brush than that. And then what I'm going to do is paste. Now, nothing happens because this happens to me every single time. I need to choose not the current layer. I need the current layer and the layer below. That's what I need. And when I do that, you get a little preview on the brush. And I'm going to go across there. And that fills in the area that I'm missing. Now, because I'm doing this in a line, it could well be that you get patterns that you want to get rid of. In which case, this time it actually looks pretty good. But if you do, so that little bit there, if I just put that there, you can just see where that red dot is and where it is now is identical. And it probably shouldn't be. So what I can do is hold down the Option key, pick a different area, and just paint over it again. And it breaks up the pattern a little bit. So moving out, that's fixed that corner. All you then really need to do is to go in and fix the other corners. So going up to the top corner there and choosing a little bit, and then painting in over that. Remember, it's going on the layer behind this image, and I could toggle that on and off. And if I toggle the others on and off, you can see just the bits I've actually painted. So very simple to fix that up there. Obviously the left-hand side and the right-hand side are going to be a little bit more difficult. So what I might decide to do there is just crop it down. I could fix it, but I haven't got the time tonight because what I'm showing you is just straightening the image. So we now have the Leaning Tower of Pisa on a hill. The hill is now leaning. Okay, so let's save that one and get into the next one. Because one thing you might want to do when you're straightening is not straighten for a fixing it perspective. You may want to straighten for a creative reason. So I've got an image here. This is one I've actually used in demonstrations. I actually have a presentation about going paperless and this image is in it. But what I wanted to do with it was to say it's an uphill battle. And for that, I needed it to be rotated slightly. So I still wanted the flag. I thought the flag had a little bit of scope to be moved slightly and it not look very odd. It not look like the hand is coming out at a 90-degree angle. So what I did was go in there, get the straighten tool, and I pulled down like that, just randomly creating an incline for that image. And we now have a slight incline on that bit there. So it's now, the hand is virtually upright, so that looks fine, but it gives me the opportunity when I apply that and fix the corners to say it was an uphill struggle and the image work with that. And I then filled in all the corners and stuff, but what you could do is, if you don't fancy spending time doing that, you can just crop that down, losing the bits where you now have no pixels. As I said, I took the time and fixed it. But there you go. That works exactly the same way. I could put that on a slide and I could put on it, it was an uphill struggle, and it would sort of work, as it were. So very, very simple. That's a slightly different use for cropping and straightening of images. Okay, how are we doing? Have we got any questions? Got any questions? I'm not seeing any questions. Everybody's sitting there and enjoying watching it, I hope. Right, blend modes. Oh, we love blend modes. Blend modes are something that can be quite difficult for people to understand. I get that. Okay, blend modes. Blend modes are a concept within virtually every image editing application I have ever seen. And it determines how the pixels on two distinct layers interact with each other. Now, generally speaking, pixels on different layers don't interact with each other at all. So here we have the background of this image, which is just a bench in some snow. There are also, if we take a look at what we've got in the file, we've got 4 layers altogether. We've got a grey, black, grey and white layer, a colours layer and colours with black and white. So we've got 4 layers in here. And the top 3 are turned off. If I just turn on the grey layer, the black, grey and white, it doesn't make any difference to this image if I turn off the background layer now, at all. Because the pixels on the 2 distinct layers are not interacting with each other in any way at all. Just to show you, if I select the layer and I change the opacity of that layer, you can see the layer is behind it, but these pixels aren't interacting in any other way other than the fact I'm making them transparent-ish. Varying degrees of opacity. That's the only way they're interacting with each other. Now, with a blend mode, for a blend mode to work, you have to have 2 layers. And those layers are the base layer and the blend mode layer. So in this file, the background is the base layer, and I'm going to change the blend mode of that second layer. So that becomes the blend layer. Now at the moment, it's set to normal, which means leave them alone. There's no interaction at all. Your blend modes are available from the drop down within the layers panel, and you have normal, darken, and lots of other options. So multiply, colour burn, lighten. Each of these is changing how the pixels on those 2 layers interact with each other. So just to start off with darken, what is darken doing? Darken is literally saying to the 2 layers, I'm going to compare the pixels in the same locations. So if you can imagine a grid of columns and rows, each pixel on the layer below, I'm going to compare it with the pixel on the layer above, and I'm going to show you the darkest pixel of the 2. And that's why on the left-hand side we can see black pixels. Because every one of those pixels is going to be darker than on the layer below. It must be, because black is the darkest colour you can get. The middle strip being grey, it's showing you the darkest pixel there. Now you can see the trees, you can see the branches on the trees, and you can see some of the bench. You are not seeing anything from the snow because they will be lighter than the grey pixels. So when it does its comparison and it shows you the grey pixel or the white pixel, it's going to show you the grey one every time. Over on the other side, let me leave that where it is because we're looking at Darton. Over on the right-hand side, it's looking at white pixels. And it's showing me the pixels that are the lightest there. Oh, no, it's still showing me the darkest. Sorry, it's showing me the darkest. So some of them, I can see more detail. I'm not seeing anything that I shouldn't be seeing. That is working perfectly. And as I change these blend modes, different things happen because the algorithm behind the blend modes changes. So as I go to darker, that actually looks identical. But as I go to multiply, it's showing me slightly different things. I've got much more detail in that grey area. Going to colour burn, it's starting to bring back detail on the left-hand side there. Now, lighten is the complete opposite of darken. So with darken, we saw all the black pixels on the left. With lighten, it's inversing that. We're seeing the complete opposite. We're seeing all of the white pixels on the right. We're seeing the grey pixels in the middle where they're lighter. And we're not seeing much of the black at all because black can't be lighter than the rest of it. So that's how blend modes work. It's an interaction of the pixels on two layers, a base layer and a blend layer. And the effect that you get actually depends on the calculation that's going on behind the scenes. So as I go through some of these, overlay is quite useful to bring back contrast in an image. If we look at that overlay there and I just quickly move back to normal, you can see, well, no, that doesn't actually helping, is it? Let's go to lighten. Right, over on the left-hand side, it's not very contrasty at all. Not seeing much there in the way of contrast. You go to overlay and you see a lot more contrast. It's much punchier. And as you go through these blend modes, you get completely different options. So just different effects based on the calculation that is behind them. So that one actually looks like an X-ray or a negative of an image. And all kinds of different things going on with these blend modes. Right, that's looking at it in terms of black, white and grey. Okay, so I've gone through all of them there. Erase actually erases a lot, so that doesn't exactly help us in this regard, does it? But what happens when you use colour? So initially this blend mode is set to normal, so we see yellow, red, blue and black. There's no interaction going on at all. But when we bring the interaction into it, by changing the blend modes, we get completely different effects. So it is going to show us all of the black pixels because the black pixels must be darker than the rest of the pixels on the layer below. But we get a completely different effect with the yellow, the red and the blue based on the colour value of the red, the yellow or the blue pixels. So we can see the snow, but we're seeing blue snow. We can see branches on the trees, but we're seeing yellow and red branches on the trees. If I just move from darken to lighten, completely different effect, but we can still see bits of the red, bits of the blue, bits of the yellow, and even bits of the black. They are in the detail in the background, really. So we're seeing different things as we move through here, completely different effects. And that's what blend modes are all about, how things interact. I have yet to find anybody that looks at blend modes and just picks one and sticks with it. You're going to go in and you're going to have a look at them all because you might think, oh, I'll go for overlay. And then look at soft light and think, actually, that's much better for this image. So it's always a good idea to go through the images and to go through the blend modes rather with your image and find one that actually gives you the effect that you're looking for. Okay, so that is blend modes and how they actually work. Let's have a look at that with some other images. What does that mean for you when it comes to working with blend modes? So I'm not going to save that one, didn't do anything with that. And what I have here is an image of a lady. So there we go. And she was just crying out to me to have a tattoo put on that arm. Now, I have an image of a tattoo. I'm just going to open that. That's the image of the tattoo that I shall be putting on there. Now that is just black pixels on a white background. It does have a white background. So closing that, I'm going to go back and use a feature that I use quite frequently in Affinity Photo, which is File and Place. Now, just to warn you, I have a shortcut key set up for that, which is Command, Shift, Option and D. But I set that up. There is actually no default shortcut key for that, but it's File, Place. So go into File, Place. I'm not going to complete it. I'm going into blend modes and I'm going into tattoo. And in there, I actually have the tattoo folder. So let's open that up from there. Now, it doesn't look like it's done anything, but if you look at the mouse pointer, it's changed to an arrow with a circle and a down pointing arrow next to it. It's loaded that image into the cursor. Now, that's great because it means, I will show you this twice. If I click once, it just puts the entire image on top of my image. In this example, that file's rather large, so I'm going to undo that, go back and redo it. So File, Place, load up the same image into my mouse pointer, but this time I know I only want it quite small on this area here. So what you can do is actually draw it out, and that way you don't have to go in and completely rescale it. You can rescale it if you want, but you've got it just about the right size to start with. Now, it wouldn't look great at that angle. It needs to actually go around a little bit. So it's the same angle as her arm is there. Let's move it down a little bit, make it a little bit smaller. There we go. Now, there's a couple of ways that you could work with this. You could sit there and take away all of the white pixels and hope that it looked okay. But it would be actually better and much quicker to do this with the blend mode. Now, you have your two layers. You have your background layer, which is the lady, and you have your second layer, which is the tattoo. Remembering that you need two layers for blend modes to work, and knowing that the background layer is the base layer, the tattoo becomes the blend layer. So that's the layer that you change the blend mode of. So in here, if I look at darken, luckily, that looks about right. That's not bad at all. But you go through them. So darker colour, multiply. Multiply is actually a little bit punchier. If we look at darken, it does do it. In fact, if I zoom in so we can really see it and go back to darken, yep, that works pretty well. But if I go to multiply, it actually looks a little bit darker to me, just fractionally different around the edges. You can go into other options as well. Lighten doesn't look great. I've never seen a white tattoo, but who knows, they might do them. So these are giving you the opposite of that. So if you think about how it was looking when we used the black, grey and white layer, you're getting exactly the same effect here. It's taking away, so screen, lighten and screen are taking away the black pixels, whereas darken, darker colour multiply is taking away the white pixels. So you can get all kinds of weird and wonderful effects going through here. None of them particularly great for this example, this tattoo. Apart from darken, darker colour multiply, so I'll go for multiply. And that now looks much more natural. And a very easy thing to do. Very, very easy to do. Don't need to make a great selection. Don't need to know any other options for losing white pixels. Just very, very simple. So I will save that and put that in the completed folder. And let's have another example with that. Now, this one was one that I did actually work with. This one's got 3 layers. But we're only interested in blending one layer onto another. But for completeness, we have got a blend layer, which is just white pixels and black pixels. And there's also some text there, meters in London. Okay, but it's this blend mode here that I'm interested in. In exactly the same way as we worked with the others, if I go into normal and I go to darken, if you're in the chat, let me know what you think you should see. Remembering that darken, darker colour, multiply, colour burn, they are all the darker type blend modes. So they give precedence to the darker pixels on the blend layer and the base layer. So if we go to darken, it will retain the black pixels. If we go down to lighten, it will retain the white pixels. And as you go down between the blend modes, this is where you start to get nice effects that you might want to use. So overlay here gives you a nice effect where, as well as retaining the skyline that you have, it's also showing through the skyline so you can actually see the detail on the building. And as you go through, you get lots of different effects. I actually really like that soft light. I think that works well. So just going through these, seeing what we've got. And because it's black and white, you don't get much out of these light options. You'd get different effects if they were coloured. But you can see there, you get lots of different options to go for. That one's not bad either, average. A little bit grey for my liking, but not bad. So those are the options we've got. I mean, even that contrast negate could work quite nicely for a background for a slide. I love my slides, as you can probably tell. But I'll go back and I will go, was it overlay I said? No, soft light. There we go. I will go back for soft light. And then I will turn that on. And you've got an image there that looks complicated to create, but actually was really straightforward. Because all I needed to do was to put the text on it. The background layer was there, and the blend layer, which was black and white, instead of having to use that and paint on it in a certain way, I just changed the blend mode and it worked perfectly. So that's one example of what you can do with that. So I will lose that, didn't really make any changes to that. This is a practical example of what I did with that. This one is a background that I had of just an image that had a lot of negative space in it. It needs some work with it. It's not exactly punchy. One thing that I could do with that using blend modes is I can make sure that I'm in here, that I'm on the background blend mode layer. Duplicate the layer, which is Command and J. Go up to normal and go down to multiply. That gives me a nice effect. Or just keep going through it. I don't really want it lighter. It needs to be punchier. Definitely needs maybe overlay or multiply. I actually thought multiply didn't look bad. So I'll go to multiply. It's a little bit dark now. But what I can do is change the opacity of that. And it will take it back. At 0, it's showing me just the layer behind. But if I put that at 50%, I've used the blend modes and I've brought a lot more colour back into it. A lot more detail. But that wasn't what I was doing with this. What I actually wanted to do with it was go and find an image to place on it. And I don't want completed. I want, in my data, blend modes, and I'm going to get the calendar. What I have here is a calendar, which it loads in as an image to my cursor, so I can literally just draw out the size that I want. That will work nicely, because once I've got it there, I can move it. So I can move it a little bit and carry on scaling it if I want. Now, at the moment, that's a normal blend mode. That's not what I'm looking for at all, is it? No, it's not. What I've done there is I've put the wrong file in there. I've put a PNG in, when actually what I wanted was a JPEG. Because my PNG has got a transparent background. So my PNG looks absolutely fine. If I had put the right file in there, I have no idea where my file has actually gone. It was a JPEG and it had a white background. So I needed to remove the white pixels. You should know by now what do you do if you want to retain the black pixels but lose the white pixels. And what I would have needed to do was change it to darken. But what I'll do is I'll show you in here that by using these blend modes, even though I don't need to lose the white pixels, you see what happens with lighten, it loses the black pixels, which won't do me any good at all. So as I go down here, I get different effects. So soft light merges it in more. Hard light gives you different options. So you can actually go down here and get very different effects. So if you want it colour or average, average means it's not quite as harsh. So there's a practical use for blend modes. Okay, so let's come out of that one. Now my last example with blend modes is something that is a little quirky, but it is something that I use it for on a regular basis. And that is scanning, when I'm scanning images. So I have an image that I've scanned. This is it, the top of Scooby. There is Scooby at the top. I have another half of this scan because it was actually an A3 and I needed to scan it in 2 pieces on a flatbed scanner. So what I'm going to do is go in and use place and go and find that image, which wasn't in there. It was in my blend modes, scan Scooby, and this time I want the bottom half of that. Now again, it's loaded it into the cursor. This is one of those occasions where I do not want to draw it out. If I draw it out, I'm going to have a problem because it would be virtually impossible to get it the right size. So all I'm going to do is just click once and that will just put it in at the size it should be. So there is the size it should be. And what I need to do is put that in the right place. but where is the right place? Because as I move it across, you can see it's got white pixels in it. It's not transparent, so I can line it up properly. How do I get that in just the right place? That looks about right. That's not too bad, but it's not perfect. And I can tell it's not perfect by zooming in, and you can see here, these pixels don't line up. And even if I move that to the side, then it's not working out on the right-hand edge of that. So I could play around for hours and try and get it right. Does it need to move down? Does it need to move up? But there's another way to do that, which is to use another blend mode. This time, the difference blend mode. Now, what the difference blend mode shows you is where there are pixels that are different, they're in white on here. So really, if I had a black band across the middle, I would know that they were lined up properly. So I'm using the arrow keys to move that second layer, move it across. That's sort of helping a bit, but not completely. As I go back, that actually looks about right, moving left to right, but clearly it's not correct in terms of moving it up and down. As I move it down, it's going worse, but as I move it up, it's actually improving it. I'm nearly there. And that last pixel has moved it into just the right place, because what it's saying now is they're all black. There are no pixels on those two layers that don't match. I can't show you any difference because there is no difference. That's exactly what I need to know that that is pixel perfect in terms of being lined up. So that's a practical use for blend modes. So I've now got my A3 image and it's pieced together in the middle and it's absolutely perfect. And I'm positive that it's perfect. So I will save that file and come out of there. Right, so that was it for looking at blend modes. The next thing that I said I would look at is looking at Photoshop files. And this was a question that I got, which was, I had a poster for one of my events. And this was the poster for my event. It was about 10 days after Affinity Photo for iPad came out, and that was the poster that advertised the event. It started life as a Photoshop file, and the question that I got was, did you make that in Affinity Photo for iPad? Now, I mentioned before we actually started going live that I use Affinity Designer extensively, and I actually used Affinity Designer. But the question got me thinking, could I do that in Affinity Photo for iPad? The answer to that was yes. So tonight I'm going to try and do it in Affinity Photo for the Mac, so the desktop version, and that's what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for something that looks like that. My starting point for this, though, was a file, which I am frantically looking for now. That does not look like it's the right file. Why is it you have absolutely every file bar the one you need? There we go. That's the file I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is drag and drop in this file, which started life as a Photoshop file. So if we actually look at the extension at the top of there, it's a Photoshop file. So what kind of fidelity have we got when we're opening a Photoshop file in Affinity Photo? And the answer to that is pretty good. So showing you what you've got in the layers, there's only one turned on at the moment, but in these layers, you have all of the layers as this file was made in Photoshop. So you can open them up, and in there you have the individual elements. So I'm going to turn some of these layers on so we can actually see what's in them. Now that layer, amongst other things, had the coffee cup and the ferns, had the keys and the hard drive, and it also had an iPad hanging off the bottom here. And didn't it have some, yep, it had some pen drives as well, some SanDisk pen drives. And as I walk through this, you can see there were lots of elements in this file. So there's a keyboard and a mouse, drawing stuff, there's some flowers there, binoculars, knives, guns, all sorts of things. Then there's the iPad Pro. That looks familiar. That was the one I used. So turning off some of these elements now, that was the iPad Pro that I used. There's also in here included some Samsung smartphones, some Apple smartphones, iPhone 6s, look the same as iPhone 7s. And there were some Nokia phones. Oh, remember those. And there's also there a text effect showing you where the file came from. Now, I'll put a link to this in the information underneath the video, so you can download it and have a play with it yourself. But let's try and recreate that, because that's what I ended up with, and that was my starting point. Right, so I need the elements that I need for a start. and some of them were in here. So let's turn the layer on. I didn't actually need the majority of these. I didn't need the ferns, and I'm not sure what that is. What's that? Oh, that's the keys. Didn't need that. This file would be much better, of course, if these layers were named, but let's not quibble. So there's the hard drive gone. There's the pen drives gone, 1, 2, and 3. So I am left with just the iPad at the bottom, which I don't want. Let's lose that. And my coffee cup at the top, which I do want. So I'm just leaving the coffee cup turned on from that layer. Then I'll go through to the technical desk and have a look at that. Did I need any of that? Don't think I did. I definitely didn't need anything from the hunter's desk, but I did need the iPad Pro. There's the iPad Pro. Those are actually the only 2 elements that I need. If we look back and compare, I've got the iPad Pro, I've got the coffee cup, that's all I need. So I definitely don't need that background then. So down here on the right hand side, we've got the background. So I'm going to toggle that off. Now at this point, I could start rotating it because what I did was rotate the iPad slightly. But because I'm trying to place the startup screen for the iPad on there, it's actually easier to do that while it's straight, while it's square on for it. So I'll go to File and Place. Again, you know, my favourite command. And I don't want Scan Scooby. I actually want my Photoshop files. And in there I have my startup screen, which is that one. And bring that in. So it loads it into the cursor. I doubt I'm going to be able to be very precise here, but I'll give it a go. I will click and drag that out. I can tell that's not 100% right, but I will get it as near as. And it's drawn it on there. Now, at this stage you might be thinking, no it hasn't, but it has. It's put it behind a layer here, and I just need to take that upwards and put it there, so it's on top of the iPad. Now you can see it's not in the right place because as I zoom in, we've got overhanging there, it's got pixels there, it's just definitely not right. So I'm going to take it up. I do need to see a tiny little bit of grey behind it so we can see that it's actually a screen and not just stuck on top of it. What I would then do is try and scale it a little bit so I get that effect around the edge. Now there is a little bit too much. It's okay right and left, I would say. A little bit too much at the bottom. So just try and make that a fraction nearer at the bottom, just a tiny bit. That doesn't look too bad. I'll go with that. It doesn't look too bad. Might need to move fractionally that way. On the other hand, maybe not. But there you go. That's about right. You could take more time with this and you could put all kinds of effects on it to give it shadow at the edges so it merges in even better, but that's not bad as it goes. So what I'm going to do is select the splash screen over the top, select the iPad behind it, and use Command and G to make a group. And we now have a group over on the right hand side of those 2 elements there. And what I'm going to do then is rotate it slightly and move it into position. It was sort of over there more. I think I might have made it a little bit bigger as well. So let's have a look back. Not bad at all. Pretty spot on. Right, 2 elements that I need to add to that to make that poster work. One, I need the gradient background. That would be a good start. So to do that, I'm going to add a new layer. And I'm going to put that layer at the bottom of the layer stack before we even get started. Otherwise, I'll have to move it later. Now, to get the gradient, I need the gradient tool. So click on the gradient tool, use the letter G. And I want the gradient to go all the way from the top to the bottom in a straight line. Now, at the moment, I've got a white-grey gradient. Not brilliant. So how you select the colours for that is you click on the colour, what would you call that? Colour swatch at either end. Colour well, either end of that gradient. So I'm going to start on the bottom gradient there. And I need the purple that comes from the icon, which is actually on my image. So I'm going to use the colour picker, which you use by clicking, holding down the mouse button and dragging over. And I'm looking for the dark purple, which is not the darkest bit. It is. It's up there. There's the dark purple. Now, it's loaded it into the colour picker. It hasn't actually applied it. I need to click once to apply it. And then repeating that process up to the top colour well, using the colour picker again, and picking the lightest pink on here. That loads it into the colour picker and click once to apply it. So that's got that bit, and the last thing that I did with this was just put some text on it. So T for text tool, or click the text tool, click once, and all it said was Affinity Photo for iPad. I have no idea if I'm spelling this correctly, because as you can see, it's quite tiny. What I need to do is make that bigger. There we go. Affinity Photo for... Oh, I managed it. Wonders will never cease. And I think I'd probably change the font on that, but you get the idea. And all of that was done very, very quickly from a free mock-up off the internet and a screen capture off my iPad. And the rest was done in here. No Photoshop required. So that's my poster. So I will save that file. And I'll put that in completed as well. And it takes a little bit of time to save it. It's quite a big file and we don't need the poster. Right, heading into another topic now, which is panoramas. Now, panoramas is where you have multiple images. You couldn't get everything in an image in, so you take a series of photos. Up to File and down to New Panorama. And you get a dialog box. Now, in the dialog box, the first thing you need to do is to add your images. So I'm going to click the Add button at the bottom. And I'm going to go into my data folder and panoramas. And the first one I'm working with is landscape. And I'm opening up these sample images. And there they all are. So there are 7 of them. I'm going to open them all up and it will load them in to this panorama dialog box. And there are my 7 images. Now, if you've loaded them in and you look and you think, no, I don't really want that one, then you can take the tick out of one. You can also select one and hit remove, which I'm not going to do. I need all of these images. But when you've got the images that you want to work with and they're all ticked, they're all selected, they're all ready to go, you then choose the Stitch Panorama option. And it has a good old think about it. How long it takes to think will depend on the size of the image, the file format of the image, how complicated it is, and how many images there are. Now, that didn't take long at all. As you can see, it gives me a preview of what that will look like. I then click OK, and it loads it in. Now, at this point, it's rendered the panorama, but it's not actually done anything else with it. It has left it there for me to have a look at. I can see the navigator and I can zoom in and have a look at it. And I've got tools up here that I can work with it. So for instance, I have a crop tool there. Once I enable a crop tool, it looks very similar to the crop tool that we've already had. We've seen that quite a few times in this demonstration, but we've got a few different options in here that we haven't had before. Obviously, what I would need to do with this is either paint the missing pixels in, which would take me quite a while, or crop it. So I could drag it down and start cropping at it. But there's a faster way when you're working with a panorama, and that is you have 2 options on your extra toolbar here, which is crop to bounds and crop to opaque. Now, what it means with crop to bounds is the biggest area of it, which is at the moment. But if you copy to opaque, it will take away all of the transparent pixels. And I don't need to drag it and have a look and be absolutely certain that I've got rid of everything. It will do it for me. So it's done that for me there. All I then need to do is double click or hit the apply button. So I'm going to hit apply and there we go. There is that panorama. I will zoom in and then pan across. You can see it is actually incredibly accurate. There are no joins there that I can see. There we go. And landscapes, of course, are the #1 thing to do this with. But these images, you know, they're made for this, aren't they? But you may be taking images that aren't that perfect and you just like a quick panorama. And that's what I did. So let's come out of there. I will save that. And I will put it in completed. So let's put panorama. Right. And when I take an image, of course, it's not perfect. It's not the best camera, maybe. It's not the best location. It's not the best subject. It's just some random images that I would like to make a panorama of. So I go back to the new panorama and I go to add. And this time I go back to my data. And I am going for panoramas and I'm going for 3 images that I took in a store just before Christmas. And they were taken for a friend of mine who loves Christmas almost as much as I do. And also he loves trains. So I wanted to take this image and I wanted to make a panorama of it. It was 3 train sets that were available for sale for Christmas. And I thought they looked great. But I couldn't get far enough back in the store to be able to take one image. So I took 3 images and thought, I'll see what Affinity can do with that when I get back. So I've got these 3 images. I'm just going to stitch the panorama together. And it didn't take that long that time. They're 3 JPEGs, only 3 of them. Maybe it thinks this one's easier, but we'll see. So I'm going to do exactly the same again to click OK. And there is my image and it's rendering it. It's having a rare old think about it. There we go. Now what I've noticed while I'm doing this is you don't get the same result every time, even though you're using the same images. I've noticed slight variations. Now for this image, I would want to crop it, and I'd want it cropped more probably than the opaque pixels, but I'll take that as a starting point. The reason I'd want more is we don't need this bit at the bottom. It's actually just the trains I'm interested in. We don't need all this distraction at the top either. So I would take that down. And I might actually choose to take that out a little bit and leave in some of those pixels, because otherwise you're going to lose some of the text on there. So about there, about like that. And then I would start trying to fill in the pixels, etc. But not too concerned about that at the moment. So click apply. Done a great job. When I did this on the iPad, it did a perfect job. Absolutely perfect. But I've noticed on the desktop, and I don't know why, maybe somebody from Affinity will know why, it's slightly off. I've got a little bit of a join over where it says please. However, when I did it before, the join was underneath the front of the train. So it seems to be fractionally different every time it does it. And as I say, it was perfect on the iPad. So I would need to go in and fix something like that. But just to be aware of that. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that so we could see the whole thing. But generally speaking, it's done a great job. And certainly for my purposes, which was to post it on social media, it was more than adequate. Okay, so that's that one. I am going to save that because they are all different. So I can go back and have a look at that and work out what the differences are. Maybe I can merge the 2 together. There's another tutorial. Right, one thing I did want to show you though, because this is rather cool. If you've been going along and you've been taking a lot of images and lots of different ones that you want to do for panoramas, I am going to go and add some images. But this time I am going to go and get mixed files. And what I've got in here is, it's obvious. Should be obvious straight away that these are different because they are different file names, different dates, different times. But I don't know which is which because I can only see tiny little things there, and I'm not concerned about that. So what I'm going to do is just hit open and see what it makes of it. And as I go in, I see my first set of the landscape, and I go on and I see my other 3. So what on earth is it going to do there? This could end up in a bit of a mess. So I hit Stitch Panorama, not taking any of those images away. And it needs a bit longer to think about it because it's looking at me and it's saying, what are you doing? These bottom 3 images don't match the rest, but it's clever enough to work out, okay, it's 2 different panoramas. Think you can fool me? But you can't. So all I need to do is hit the OK button. And it actually opens up 2 images for me. So there's the one of the train. Oh, I'm glad it did that. Proves me right that I didn't lie. This time the patch is under the front of the train, and this bit is fine. So it is a little bit random. But there is my image of the trains, and there is my other image. Now, I don't recommend that you load in 3,000 panorama images and expect it to do its stuff. Give it a hand, but if you did only want 2 or 3, it can handle that, and it knows which images go with which. So those are exactly the same ones that we had before. I will just apply them and then I will close them as we've seen them before. But it can work out multiple panoramas as well. So something to be aware of. Right, okay, so heading off into the last demo of the session, which is filters. It was a filter that we had. So let me have a look which image I need to start with. Right, image I need to start with is this one. So I'm bringing in an image. And this is just an image that I want to, this is my background image really. I don't want to do anything with this image other than put something on the top of it. It's the International Soccer Tournament and I want to put the logo on it, and I have a logo to put on it. My logo, unfortunately, is a JPEG. So if I show you my logo, that's the logo, and it has a white background. So what I'm going to do is go back to my background and use File Place to go and get my file, which is not in there. It is in my white paper, my blue fox, and there is my blue fox. It loads it into the cursor, and I want to put it down here. I want my blue fox down there. Not great, seeing it look better, because I've got the white background. Now, if you've been keeping up tonight, blend modes. I know what you're thinking, blend modes. Because blend modes we've seen completely lose white pixels, which is all very well. But if we try to do that, we might be disappointed. So let's go and have a look. Darken lost them before. So let's have a look at darken. Well, it does. Sadly, loses half the fox as well. So as we keep going through the blend modes, some are better than others. The lighten ones won't tend to do much other than tweak it slightly. So just going through these blend modes, none of them are going to give you what you want, which is the fox with no white pixels. So as I go through them, none of them are going to work. None of them. I did think luminosity looked nice because the green worked well with the background. So I played around with that for a while and thought, I like that. But then, of course, I've still got the problem of the white pixels. Need to lose the white pixels. And what I'm going to do with those white pixels is apply a filter to them. So as I go up to filters and I go to colours, and I'm just thinking, what do I do? Yes, what I need to do here, I'm just going to duplicate that so we can do a before if we need to. So toggle it off there. So back up to filters, back down to colours, and within here there is an option, erase white paper. And I thought, I wonder if that could possibly do exactly what it says it does. So let's just apply it. And it did. There we go. Now it's even changed the bounding box so I can actually scale that a little bit better and fill that space better. Move it down. There we go. Now if I wanted that fox back to being blue, I could go back to normal. But I actually think it works really well in luminosity. Either way, the white pixels have gone. I've lost the white pixels by applying a filter. So that was what we had before, and that's what we've got after. So losing the white pixels. And I'm mindful of time, but you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. I've got another one. I've got another one where, more photographic this one, to be honest. And that will use exactly the same features. So let's just leave those alone. This one is an image of some daffodils. So let's open up the daffodils. Again, it is a JPEG and it has a white background. So that must have been taken against a different type of background to start with. But it's now got a white background, which doesn't help us at all. So I put in this file a sky. All I did was place the image. It's a sky. And I would really like to see those daffodils against that sky background. That would be my aim. I could, of course, have a play around with the blend modes. Yes, it didn't work well. It won't, because the pixels on the blend layer are not solid pixels. So they're interacting all right with the background, but not in a good way. So unless you're looking for something sci-fi, that's not going to work. But we know that we've got this option of removing the white background by going to the filter and going to colours and erase white paper. And it takes it away. Not too bad at all. If, however, we look very, very closely, we've developed a problem, which is it takes away not just the white pixels around the image, it takes away the white pixels in the image. Issue. Right, but because we now have that on a completely transparent background, so if I zoom in again there, you can see it is transparent. There's a way to fix it, which is quick and dirty, but it fixes it. So turning the sky back on, we need a new layer. We need a blank layer. So we've got a blank pixel layer. I've just added a new pixel layer. And all I'm going to do is go and get a brush. And I'm going to set the hardness of that brush up to 100. And that's way too big. So I'm going to take it down using the square brackets. So square brackets over here. square brackets to change the size of that brush. And as I move it, you can even see that it's giving you a preview of what that would look like. Now, if I paint on this pixel layer over here, you will see it, because the daffodil layer is transparent, which is why I need a small brush, because as I paint, I need it to be behind there. And I even need that to be smaller as I head off up to the top. So I definitely need it to go around there. But then I realised as I looked at this, these are semi-transparent as well. So some of them I might want to bring back. Others I might want to leave them semi-transparent. And you might want to see some of the blue through them. Actually, I don't really want to. I want them blue. Maybe see a little bit of the transparency at the edges, but not all the way into it. So just adding that in. If you're getting lost with why can't I see those pixels, it's because it's behind that layer. So if I turn that on, you can see the layer is behind the daffodil layer, but it solved the problem. It has solved the problem. And although I used white pixels because I knew that was what was already there will be nothing to stop you picking a green colour or something like that. So I could actually go in there, and instead of having white pixels, I could use this to pick up a sort of very, very light green colour, change my brush to that, making sure I'm on the right layer. As I paste in, it takes away the white pixels and changes them to green. So this is how you could use this feature of Erase White Paper to fix things. And to finish that image off, I thought it still looks rather fake. It looks rather fake because the sky is very much in focus, as are the daffodils, and you can't really do that. You're not really going to have multiple things that sharply in focus, not for it to look natural. So what I did was I went to the background layer and I went up to add a live filter layer, and the one that I added was a blur, and I think I went probably for that one, and I increased the blur as we went. So you're going to show me a blur. You are blurring, aren't you? There we go. So as I move up the radius of that blur, you can see it's blurring those clouds, which makes it look a whole lot more natural. It does, however, bring in that it's blurred it at the edges. So as I look at the edges, they've actually gone transparent. So what I would need to do with that is select it, and using the move tool, just make it a little bit bigger and take those pixels out of where we can see them, and just do that. And there we go. So that was the Erase White Paper filter, which has more uses than you would imagine. But heading off back in and wrapping up. If you've missed any of my Affinity Photo sessions, you can find them at elainegiles.co.uk/affinity-photo. And every video that I've done on Affinity Photo is available from that page. Now, I've been talking about Affinity Photo for iPad. And one of the issues with Affinity Photo for iPad is that sometimes when you bring an image back from it to your desktop, which is currently 1.5.3, I believe, but it's definitely 1.5 point something, it won't open. There is a beta available of Affinity Photo, and that beta is available publicly that you can download and install. It installs alongside the version of Affinity from the App Store, so you can use both. So be aware of that if you have problems with your files. If you are looking for more training, you can find a lot of videos, and I do mean a lot of videos, from Serif Affinity at Vimeo. They have a channel on there. As it says there, 374 videos. I think there's even more now since I took that screenshot. And there are for Affinity Photo for Mac, Windows, iPad, and also Affinity Designer as well. And talking of Affinity Designer, the next session I'm doing is actually for Affinity Designer. You can find all my Affinity Designer stuff at elainegiles.co.uk/affinity-designer. And I'll be looking at sort of a 101 for photographers. So a lot of people know what to do with Affinity Photo in terms of editing photos. Maybe they've come to it from Photoshop. Maybe they've come to it from other photographic editors. But Affinity Designer, maybe you've not used a vector application before. But I absolutely adore Affinity Designer. So check out my channel and you will find that coming up shortly, or even, if you're watching this afterwards, available already. So just to wrap up, I have been Elaine Giles. You can find me all over the internet as Elaine Giles. Do come along and say hello. If you've got any questions, any of those methods of contacting me, you would be most welcome. Particularly my blog, which is elainegiles.co.uk. And also you find all my YouTube videos on YouTube as the Elaine Giles. But until next time, I'm heading off into Q&A, and I will see you next time.